Hello, my lovely rose garden. My name is Avalon Roselin, indie author, and your guide to surviving the apocalypse for the evening. To say that Hell Followed With Us was a good book is woefully underselling it. This debut from author Andrew Joseph White is a powerhouse that rewired my brain for the 2 short evenings it took me to read it. So much of this story clearly comes from the author's own passion and pain, expressed in a way that clicked perfectly for my brain. I swear it's like White reached into my maladaptive daydreams and turned them into a coherent, if horrifying, narrative. Hell Followed With Us follows the story of Benji, an escapee from a Christian eco-fascist group called the Angels who, 2 years prior to the story, released a mutagenic virus called the Flood onto humanity and wiped out billions of people. But that isn't enough for them. To achieve their ultimate end of eliminating human life from the earth, they have infected Benji with a strain of the Flood called Seraph, which will allow Benji to control all the mutated remnants of corpse flesh that the cult refer to as graces and everyone else calls abominations, but we, for all intents and purposes, can just call zombies. While on the run, Benji ends up meeting up with a group of local LGBTQ youths called The Watch, who protect the Atchison LGBT Plus Center, or ALC. They take Benji in and offer him the first real taste of community and companionship that he's had in quite a while, but the Angels want their weapon back, and they're obviously willing to go to extremes to make that happen. At the ALC, Benji also begins to grow closer with Nick, a gay autistic boy who more or less acts as second in command to the ALC's kind leader Aaron and enforces the rules when she cannot. Nick is the one to learn Benji's secret, and the two work together in a teetering dance of hesitance, attraction, and the desire to do right by the people around them, while still also just being teenagers in a world that has literally gone to hell. Using Nick's strategic mind, Benji's ability to control graces, and Benji's insider knowledge of the cult, the two plan to overturn the hold that the Angels have in order not to save the world, but save their world as they struggle to find resources and food to maintain the needs of the ALC's population. Oh, and at the same time, Seraph is actively mutating Benji into his final form. The list of content warnings is long for this one. Gore, body horror, transphobia, including misgendering and dead naming, violence, religious trauma, toxic relationships, climate disaster, medical horror. Oh yeah, it's here. But I think that the raw, visceral handling of these topics is a point in the book's favor. Benji does not live in a world where he has the privilege to ignore these topics, and neither do a lot of trans folk living right now. Sometimes the only way to fight back against the monster is to confront it head-on, and that is what White does in this book. I should also probably mention that the book is set in the near future of the 2050s, where Earth's population had, before the Flood, reached 9 billion, and temperatures in February are described as quite warm. This was the impetus for the Angels' actions. They believed that there needed to be another biblical extinction in order to deliver humanity from their climate-based follies and grant they, the Angels, entry into heaven for enacting God's will and saving the planet. The horror of this is emphasized throughout the story in both the characters' points of view and in the small quotes that punctuate the beginning of each chapter, some coming from the Angels' fictional yet disturbingly familiar doctrine, and reactions to them from fictional experts on the subject of eco-terrorism. Hell Followed With Us is strongly character-focused, which is right up my alley. That isn't to say that there is no plot, there definitely is. However, most of the plot events hinge on following Benji's view of himself and the world around him, healing from the trauma of being a part of a religious cult, and so on. The book starts in media res with Benji's escape from the Angels, something his father died to accomplish, and so Benji is also dealing with the grief of losing his father throughout the events of the book. Benji is also navigating a complex relationship with the boy he thought he loved, who he was engaged to, but who very much believes in the Angel's mission and is happy that Benji is becoming Seraph. Benji is really going through it, and is a compelling character to go through this all with. He doesn't make the perfect choices. He is a heavily traumatized queer teen who is actively mutating into a monster. Mistakes are going to happen, and that helps drive the action forward, not just through contrivances, but also through Benji's view of himself shifting as he worries about losing his human connections to violence or disease or his own actions. I hesitate to talk about spoilers in this review because I really do strongly recommend this book to those who can stomach it, and also because there really are no unforeseen plot twists. Hell Followed With Us tells the reader point blank exactly what to expect, and that does not make it any less impactful when it does. And while the characters may sometimes have messy reactions to certain revelations, I wouldn't say that it ever goes as far as the dreaded third act misunderstanding. Relationships are affected but not destroyed, as everyone understands that they're all in the same leaking boat, struggling to survive for one more day. The goals of the characters are also very self-centered in a way that makes sense and drives emotional connection from the reader. Like I said earlier, Benji and Nick aren't necessarily trying to save the world. It's a little late for that. But their world. They want to protect the ALC and the people within it because that is what they have left. There is no reversing the flood, there is no cure, there is no saving humanity as a whole. They can stop the angels from using Benji to do any more harm, but there isn't this grandiose plot to save the world, and that ultimately makes the conflicts and triumphs feel more grounded. Nothing in this world is easy, but the characters are doing the best they can for the people in front of them, as most people in such a situation would. I am going to touch on spoilers now, so if you are interested in reading Hell Followed With Us, you may want to click away now. If you don't mind the spoilers, as I said, there aren't really any huge twists or secret reveals in this book, or if you think this book might be too much for you, but you do still want to know what happens, then I'll see you on the other side of the warning. If you are leaving the video now, please remember to leave a like and subscribe for more content like this. I make videos about the books I read and the books I write, and your support really makes a difference for an indie author like me. If you're interested in supporting me even further, please consider buying my books or becoming a patron. You can find the links to my website, Patreon, Ko-fi, and social media accounts in the description. Alright, here we go. The revelations. I think the main thing people are going to want to know is, does Benji get better? Is there a way to reverse the changes Seraph makes to his body? The answer is no. Benji mutates into Seraph, and it is a permanent change. Benji just is an eldritch horror by the end of the book. Thankfully, he is able to retain his ability to speak, but it is noted that due to the changes in his jaw and throat area, it isn't the easiest thing in the world to do. Hell Followed With Us is unrelenting in its descriptions of what Seraph does to Benji's body, including frequently vomiting up organs and his skin slowing off. Like I said, take those content warnings seriously. What I find extremely interesting is how Seraph changes Benji's brain. It does make him a little more aggressive, or at least that is what he assumes when he attacks a member of the ALC at one point, but the main change is the growing connection it gives him to the Graces. At first, he can kind of control them. He can make them stop or go, attack or defend. As Seraph continues to overtake him, there's this kind of tenderness in the connection Benji has with the Graces. The Graces, rather the Flood itself, is designed in some way to resonate with Seraph. Seraph was genetically modified to basically be the queen bee of the Grace drones. They want to be with Seraph. They want to do what Seraph wants. They are docile in Seraph's presence when Benji is calm, and murderous when Benji is angry. It's fascinating, really, and I'm glad that White took the time to really explore this bizarre yet beautiful relationship. It isn't quite the same as Seraph connecting Benji's humanity with the lingering humanity of the Graces. It's something else, and it scratched an itch in my brain that I didn't know was there. There is also a semi-love triangle going on, and that resolves by the end, of course. I say semi because Benji is dealing with so much other shit that he isn't really considering Nick a possible romantic partner for most of the book. He's still getting over his ex-fiancé Theo for the most of the time they spend together, and then, of course, Theo shows back up again just to throw a wrench in Benji's ability to move on with his life. Theo is an interesting character and antagonist. There is definitely a sense to him that he does legitimately love Benji, but he loves being accepted by the Angels more. The Angels are a far-right extremist religious sect and definitely the kind of people who think any sort of queerness is a sin. Benji's mother dead names him and refers to him as a girl several times. But they are willing to put up with Theo being gay if he stays in line and acts like the soldier they've raised him to be. There's definitely something about acceptability politics going on there that would probably be more apparent on a reread if I was to pay more attention to his dialogue. Theo's purpose is to make Benji doubt himself, doubt if what he's doing is the right thing, doubt if what's happening to him is really that bad, or if he has, as the cult claims, been given a gift. After all, Seraph chose him. Other test subjects died, but Benji is the destined savior. Theo also distracts Benji with physical comfort, kissing, sex, and the promise that he is still attractive even with half his face missing, in order for the Angels to raid the ALC and leave Benji with literally nowhere else to go but back to them. There is a fairly minor, in my opinion, reveal that Nick was also once a part of the Angels and was a part of the same troop that Theo is the sole survivor of. Basically, Nick realized the Angels were in the wrong and slaughtered his entire troop except for Theo, who escaped but in disgrace, and getting Benji back is Theo's way of redeeming his failure. It does provide some connection between Nick and the other major characters beyond his relationship with Benji, be that friendship or romance or general camaraderie, but I didn't think it was a huge reveal, and it's not focused on too heavily. As stated earlier, there is no real third act breakup. When Benji returns to the Angels following the raid on the ALC, it is always with the ultimate goal of destroying them, and he trusts in Nick and the remaining ALC members to help him. If anything, Nick's former Angel status brings him and Benji a little closer together because they are able to understand what the other went through. It's not a huge thing, but I was happy with how it was handled and the fact that it didn't fall into the typical tropes. The conclusion of the book was... how to talk about it? What physically happens is Benji causes the Graces to start mauling the Angels and the ALC members take out any stragglers. Theo, enraged at Benji's betrayal, injects himself with a failed version of Seraph called Dominion, and this cues a Resident Evil-esque boss battle between Seraph and Dominion. Also, Benji engages in a kind of battle in the center of the mind against Theo, and that gets a little weird. Ultimately, Benji and Seraph come out on top, and the Angels' plot is foiled, thus saving Benji's little patch of the world. It is, despite everything, an optimistic ending. Maybe the world is screwed, but at least this group of queer young adults will be okay, and sometimes that's the most you can hope for. If nothing else I've said in this review has piqued your interest in Hell Followed With Us, maybe this description will. If you want to read about queer religious trauma by way of Resident Evil, this is the book for you. I am not joking about the medical body horror that occurs throughout the book, and I think that Resident Evil's bioweapons are probably the most apt comparison to the Flood's effect on the human body that I can make. As someone who has never had the stomach to play Resident Evil, but has always had a fascination with the games as a zombie fan, I thoroughly enjoyed the descriptions in this book. They are visceral and tasty. There are some characters and subplots I skipped over here, but I'll leave those for you to discover for yourself. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Please leave me an emoji that represents your religion of choice, or lack thereof, and tell me what you would do with the power to control zombies. Thank you so much for watching, and a special thank you to my patrons. If you'd like to see your name here or in the description below, please consider joining my Patreon. Your support means so much to me and allows me to continue making content. If you want to support my content in different ways, consider buying my books, donating on Ko-fi, subscribing to the channel, or even just giving this video a like and comment. Any and everything is appreciated so much. Keep growing till next time, Rose Garden!